we on? Yes. Everybody could come on and gather up, have a seat. Okay. So this is our, count them, fourth session in this class. There's a quick recap. We talked about our theology of death, and then we talked about funeral planning. The representative for Parker Moore is here. Last week then we talked about medical issues, medical power of attorney, those sorts of things, and how to prepare yourself and your family for those things. And then today, now we get to talk to the lawyers. So we'll talk about estate planning, and hopefully we'll leave a lot of time at the end for questions and such like this. So as a quick introduction, Cheryl Brewer, our two attorneys who are with us today. They happen to both be from the same law firm, Clark Partington. That was not intentional. They just happened to end up being from the same one. And they're both experts in this field. So I'm going to get out of the way, and then we'll talk, and I'll interrupt a couple times with some of my stories as we go along. So who's going first? All right.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much, Father Michael, for the opportunity to speak with you today. We're going to be talking about some estate planning matters, and we've had this talk a couple of times through the past. And so we're going to give you a couple of unique scenarios that apply perhaps to family members or to you in particular, but just an overview of what we deal with in the estate planning context. Troop's going to go in just a minute, and then I'll follow up afterwards. But in general, what we're dealing with in the estate planning context is a will or some written plan to make your assets pass the way that you desire them to pass at your death. It's an obvious statement, but that's what we're dealing with. And that can be in the form of a will, which most of us think of. It can be with a trust, which is a will substitute in many instances. And it can also pass without that as the law directs. And we call that intestacy. So without a will, that is the way that our assets pass. You don't forfeit them to the governor or the orphans fund. The law says where they would go if you did not have a will. And then certainly there are other ways that assets pass, and that would be through titling of assets. And that can be by beneficiary designation. We all deal with this on a routine basis, but when someone passes, that's when we look and see how are these assets titled and what will happen to them upon the death of the owner. And so when we say titling of assets, we might have a will that says, I leave it all to University of Florida Marching Band, but if my assets are jointly titled with my wife, then when I pass, it won't matter what my will says, they're going to pass automatically to that co-owner. If I have other things that have beneficiary designations like life insurance and retirement, how I designate my beneficiary is how those assets will pass. So once again, it doesn't matter what my will says, it could be completely different, but if I have designated my beneficiary on policies and accounts, then they're going to pass in that manner. And so the estate planning documents, typically either a will or in some instances a revocable trust. Other names for that are an inter vivos trust, grantor trust from time to time it's called that, living trust, sometimes it's called the family trust, and all of these are essentially synonyms for a revocable trust agreement. That is ultimately a will substitute because it says what to do with your things when you die. Sometimes it can have advantages, but ultimately it tells us what to do with your assets when you die. And there's often either discussion or miscommunication or intrigue about whether to have a will or a trust. And once again, they both say what to do with your things when you die. They can have benefits, they can have features that can be important, they can have extra effort, extra legal effort. But we often think about if we're talking about does someone need a will or a trust, which one? I mentioned that it's like having a car or a truck. They both are modes of transportation. If you need to haul a lot of bricks, you're going to want a truck. If you're trying to get down the interstate fast, you're going to want a car. It just depends on what we're doing. And then an important piece of having the revocable trust as the main estate planning document is what's in it. And so you could think about a revocable trust being like a storage unit that you rent. And if our house and our garage is full and we want to get organized, we might rent a storage unit. and then we have to put things in it. Just simply having a storage unit doesn't make us more organized, but putting things into it might. So what are the forms of the documents, or what we're talking about? You, in addition to the main estate planning document, the will or trust, we also will almost always discuss and have a durable power of attorney. And the power of attorney designates someone else to act on your behalf in a wide variety of matters. There are, and by the way, the word, just to clarify, the word durable is what we typically say. And that just means essentially a modern, current power of attorney that does not terminate at incapacity. That's just the long answer on that. So a durable power of attorney. We deal with powers of attorney on a regular basis. When we go buy a car, we give a power of attorney to the car dealer. To do what? We might wonder. To change political parties, to sign you up for the war, to take out all of your money. No, that is a limited power of attorney. And so we can give a limited power of attorney, and that's on a day-to-day basis. But generally, as part of the estate planning process, we're going to consider giving someone a durable, broad, general power of attorney that allows a trusted person, spouse, adult child, family member, the ability to sign our names in almost every aspect, other than showing up for work, voting for the president, and that's just an exercising of fiduciary power. So the power of attorney is very important, and it can sometimes be the most important document in our folder, because if someone is incapacitated but not deceased, how can we get things done that need to be done? Filing taxes, speaking to lawyers, speaking to accountants, acting on our behalf. So the power of attorney can be a very important document. And then we also a very important document, we kind of think of it as low level because you can pull this offline, but it is the medical power of attorney. There are a lot of names for this. The designated healthcare surrogate is sort of the proper name of this. And it is also kind of comes under the umbrella of the living will. And so often when we go to a new healthcare provider, they're going to ask us, do you have a living will? And really what they're asking is a few things, importantly. Can someone else act on your behalf medically? So if they tap you on the shoulder and say, would you like some Tylenol, and you can't answer, then someone else can answer for you, and that facilitates medical attention. Also, it includes a HIPAA waiver, which is important to have so that designated healthcare representative can look into your file and deal with your medical decisions. It goes on to get into broader things, end-of-life care, prop your feet up, put the gaiters on, make me comfortable. It can have organ donation, but the main thing to me, so those are important, but they're not necessarily legal issues. The main legal issue is to designate someone in writing to act on your behalf if you're unable to do so. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Troop. I'm going to be quiet for a minute, but for his piece. But an important topic that I'm going to come back to. You've heard about it in the last several weeks in these presentations, but burial and funeral instructions, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And we also have just some good, clever, available options right now for some planning. And before I turn it over to Troop, let me just give you a quick update on things that really drive a lot of concern and worry in taxes. And so there are sort of two wings of the taxes that we deal with in my line of work. There's income tax that we all deal with, and then there's the death tax, the estate tax, the gift tax, grandchildren's tax, the generation skipping transfer tax. So those are completely separate concepts, laws, regimes, obligations. We all have to file our income tax coming pretty soon, but not all of us have to deal with the estate tax. And so just a quick update on some of the figures, and these change dramatically and frequently. And I guess it's job security. They keep posting new numbers, and you might not keep up with them, but it's our job to do so. And so the death tax is awful. It's 40%. You have to pay 40% of your assets to the federal government just for the end-of-life death. But there's an exemption below which there is no death tax. There's no estate tax. And the exemption, through my career, started out at $600,000 and it went up to $1 million, $2 million, $3.5 million. It went away. It came back at $1 million. It went to $5 million, okay. And now it is currently $13,610,000 per U.S. citizen taxpayer. Together, that's $27 million for a married couple. And so now the death tax worry, I've just relieved so many people about the worry, whether you have to pay death tax. And so below $27 million for a married couple, so don't worry about it, no concern, until the law changes further. And so just bear in mind that our tax laws generally have a 10-year shelf life. They get implemented, and unless they are made permanent after 10 years, in so many words, then they expire. And so this law that I'm describing to you, the $13,610,000 exclusion, it will go up next year. It'll be even more. It could be $14 million, $28 million per household until the year 2026, in which case it goes back down to $7 million. So just keep reading the Wall Street Journal. Keep your eye on this issue. Or it could be made permanent. If our faithful representatives in Washington work together, it could be made permanent.
In other words, never.
And then there is some other concepts you either know or you bump into from time to time. What if we make a gift? And if we make a gift, there is a gift tax. It's 40% of the amount of the gift. That's horrible. So you're going to go home and worry about birthday presents coming up. I'm going to go home. My son Mac turned 16 this week, and I'm going to go, what did we give him? A pocket knife and a watch. How much is this worth? You don't have to worry about that. There is a minimum level that the IRS says, we don't care about birthday presents and picking up dinner and free rent and allowance. And that number, that's the old $10,000 number, which is now $18,000 due to inflation. So the point here is that we can give away $18,000 per year to every person on planet Earth without even telling the IRS. They don't care. That's just birthday presents and free gas and free rent. Over $18,000, they start to score keep us against our $13,610,000. So I'm just telling you, the point there is there is a gift tax. Anything under $18,000 per person per year, which is $36,000 for a married couple, the IRS doesn't care. And above that, we simply file a gift tax return to let them know what we did. I gave $20,000 to my son. $18,000 is invisible, $2,000 is tax reportable. A couple of other figures that we deal with, I'll get to in just a bit when I speak on my piece. And now I want to turn it over to Troop, who is going to take one of those off the shelf that we've talked about, the sort of the forms of the documents, and he's going to talk through the basics of what someone like Troop needs. That could be members of your household, that could be you, young parents who are very busy at work, I'm proud to say, and who needs to stop and think about what should his will say with two wonderful new young children, married, but needs to think about his estate planning. So what does the will for someone like Troop need to look like? And before I turn it over to Troop, let me ask Michael.
I'm going to squeeze in for 1 second. Sometimes I always want to make sure we know why we need to do this, right? Raise your hand if you've known heirs of some estate who have gotten in a fight after the person died. Okay. Now that can happen with a good will. It will happen with a bad one. Do you hear me? I've been there more times than I want to admit. My favorite story about this is I was a youth minister in Birmingham, and I knew the kids in the family, and one of the two members of the church were brothers. Mom had an old antebellum home. They had the old swords, they used at the weddings to cut the cake, all of that. She dies. One of the sons had a trip planned. The thing was, okay, I'm going to go on my trip. When I come back, we're going to sit down and work through everything. He comes back, and the house is empty. Brother had emptied the house while he was gone, and then that led to lawsuits and whatever. My point in this is, if you want, one, how you want your assets to be handled upon your death is important. But also, the more clarity you can give and the better you do this work, then if the people you leave behind are upset, they'll be upset with you, which is better than being upset with their brother or whatever. Does that make sense? So, and I'm going to ask a couple questions that I have of these guys, but why, if you just leave it to the state, as he mentioned, you may have unintended consequences that you didn't think through. And I'll use an example from my family that Richard actually helped me deal with. My grandfather was scared of attorneys. And so he had a will, but it was his own way of doing it. And it was all by survivorship because he didn't want it kind of ending up outside the family. But my aunt died before my grandfather did, which means by law, my nephew would have gotten 0. Does that make sense? Unintended consequence of their will. If he would have asked that question to an attorney, he would have gone, no, yeah, that's not a good thing because of this. You could put clauses in there and deal with that problem. And we had to deal with that after the fact. And it became way more complicated because none of us wanted to get to heaven and look at my aunt and say that, none of us became millionaires, but have to say that he was left out. Does that make sense? So the work you're doing is not only to make sure your desires are done upon your death, but also making sure that things are left whole in your system and relationships upon your death as well. So, I'll say this again at the end. Everybody in this room needs a will. Every single person does, and you'd be shocked how often I deal with families where there isn't one. For families that you would think there should be one, there aren't. Everybody needs a will. And if money's not an issue, everybody should talk to somebody who actually knows the law and can help them do the thing that makes their intentions a reality and doesn't have unintended consequences. Y'all get me on that? So, the other question I'm going to ask them at the end, you'll start thinking about now, is when do you need to change your will? Like, what are things that happen in your life that would be why you'd have to go back to an attorney and talk through things? All right, now back to Troop.
All righty, good morning. Good to be here with you all. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Richard. I don't usually wear loud ties, but my Tar Heels got a big win last night, so y'all bear with me. Directly caveat there, or parlay there. When I had my second daughter back in November, I started thinking about, I got to put an estate plan in place. I need a will. I didn't have one. So spoke with Richard, spoke with some peers at my firm and here in town about what they do. And the situation that people my age with young children want to avoid is what's called guardianship. If I were to die, along with my wife, as it is now, if I were to die, Sarah, my wife, would inherit everything. If we were to die simultaneously, God forbid, Michael put in a good word for me, I'll need some help, but everything would go to my 2 daughters, but through the guardianship process, which is kind of a lengthy court process where a judge appoints a guardian to manage my assets, our assets, until my children, my daughters, reach the age of majority, which is the age of 18. That's a long time. And again, it's a costly process, and I don't have any say over who that guardian would be. That's for the judge to decide. So there's a unique estate device you can put into place that combines the will that we've been talking about and a trust into a single document. It's called a testamentary trust. So at the moment that I die, a trust is formed, and the assets that are of my estate, if Sarah dies with me, my wife, all go into the trust. And I delineate in my will how that trust is to manage and distribute my assets. Richard and I joked about teenage children and even their majority age at 18, probably not great to drop a big bank account and other assets into their hands. So this estate plan allows me to put blinders and bumpers down the lane on how those assets are going to be managed, how they're to be distributed to my children. For example, if I were to say at the age of 25, my 2 daughters would get a distribution. At the age of 30, they'll get the balance. I can appoint the trustee as well. I can appoint a successor trustee if that trustee declines the opportunity to help me out and manage my estate. So there's a lot of flexibility there. It gives me as a parent a lot of assurances that, God forbid, something like that were to happen, we've got some coverage and I've got some comfort that my estate will be managed the right way for my kids. As part of that, I can make a delineation in my trust document that says, to fund my children's education, to provide food, shelter, clothing for them until they're 21 or so. I could also say, direct certain assets, certain distributions to be put into something like a 529 account, a college savings plan. So transitioning to kind of talk a little bit about these 529 plans with the major, very large caveat that I'm not a financial advisor, although I play one in court sometimes. 529 plans are getting very popular. Y'all might have heard about them, but they are great educational planning tools to help you and your children. So just a few details of those plans. They're for higher education expenses, which when I first looked into them, I assumed meant college. No, you can use a 529 and distributions from a 529 to pay for kindergarten through 12th grade, with a certain cap for K through 12. They can pay for college, of course. They can pay for higher education. They can pay for vocational school. The money is very flexible. It's a post-tax contribution you make to the plan year to year, but the distributions to pay for qualifying expenses are all tax-free. The growth in those funds are all tax-free. They're great planning tools. If I have Eleanor, my oldest daughter, if she's just a rock star through school, gets a bunch of scholarships, doesn't need any money for college, then I can roll it over to Bouchelle, my younger daughter, and she can be the new beneficiary under that same plan. And then if she's not quite the stellar student or wants to go to Carolina for $40,000 a year, I can help her fund her dreams. A lot of flexibility. If my daughters are both just rock stars, both scholarship students all the way through, I can roll those funds over into an IRA as of January of this year with certain qualifications as to that IRA. I can use it to pay down my own student debt if it's still in place in 2047 or whenever that is. So it really is a great tool. It gives you a lot of flexibility. The funds can be used for a lot of different things, and that's kind of what we focused on in our personal planning for our kids for their educational purposes. And I think with that, Richard, unless I missed anything.
All right, and so, Troop, under the will that
Yeah.
has testamentary trust aspects,
Right.
as you described, what are the three roles that we need to pick as the executor and the trustee, and also if we need a guardian, how do we deal with that?
If I have a will that designates the guardian?
In the will, don't we appoint those three roles?
That's right, yes. So trustee is somebody I would trust to manage the assets, like Richard. Guardian can be, I guess, a godparent or other family member that you trust for the personal aspect of raising your kids. And so again, just the whole purpose of that testamentary trust within your will just lets you paint the world as best you can of how it's going to look after your death. And that's just a great benefit to a lot of our clients and to myself as well.
Thank you, True.
Thank you.
And tying the idea of the 529 together with the gifting, we can make contributions, as Troop said, to family members, children, grandchildren's 529 plans, and that is a gift. So if someone wants to make a contribution to their grandchild or child's grandchild, let's say, 529 account, that is a gift. So we look at the $18,000 limitation, $36,000 for a married couple per year, and that is, we're giving a gift, but it's a gift into this investment account. And one thing that's nice is that those can be made, they can be sort of front loaded for 5 years. So we can actually make a gift into a 529 plan of 5 years worth of the $18,000. And that would be $90,000 that can be put into a 529 in 1 year. Now, you have to sit out the next 4 years, and there's no birthday presents and there's no Easter presents, but it can be front loaded is the point there. And those are extremely valuable, broad and increasing usefulness. There's also one thing that I just want to point out, I just learned this, that for the Florida prepaid or any state's prepaid, so Florida prepaid, you can buy tuition now for a child or grandchild later. And these are really good plans. They can be insurance policies, but those are using dollars today to buy tuition later. So the Florida prepaid is a separate category of a 529 account, just by the way. And the point I'm making here is that the legislature just realized they had charged too much. So if you have a prepaid college plan out there, go onto the website and see if they owe you some money back, and they will mail you a refund, which is wonderful. Now, I want to get into next just some concepts to take away. And we've been talking about the main documents that we all need, and now we're going to talk about being able to leave a legacy to a charitable organization, Christ Church. We can do that to Episcopal Day School, any other charitable organization. We can do that in a number of ways. We can do that every year. So later in an hour, when we make our annual pledge and make a contribution to the church, that's an annual contribution. We can do that in our will or trust, a charitable bequest. We can say, and when I die, give so many dollars to the phase 3 of the EDS Playground campaign, which is a huge success. And so we can make a charitable bequest under our will or trust. And we can also do this through designation of retirement. And this is just a wonderful opportunity that's come up, in my view, just something that's interesting. In the last couple of years, the federal law controlling retirement accounts has been rewritten as the Secure Act. So whatever we used to know about our IRAs and 401ks and profit sharing plans and retirement generally is now controlled through the new law that tells us a little bit differently than what we used to do. It tells us when we have to start taking money out, how assets, retirement accounts that are inherited must be pulled out. It used to be for a long, long period of time. Now it's 10 years, generally speaking. So the Secure Act tells us how we deal with retirement accounts anymore. And one thing that we all are aware of and we deal with from time to time are required minimum distributions, where the IRS says you must take out this amount of money to be calculated according to the amount and your age and the factors. This is the amount of money that must be withdrawn from a retirement account in this year. Failure to do so is a dramatic penalty and very disadvantageous to fail to take out the required minimum distribution. And generally speaking, when it comes out, it's income. You get your money back, and that is taxable income, generally speaking, not a Roth IRA. We're talking about traditional retirement plans. And so you must get your money. You must come receive your income. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, if it pushes us into a different tax bracket that we didn't want to be in. And so the concept that we can now do is, first of all, we could designate a charitable organization on a percentage or all or whatever we wanted to do as our designated beneficiary. And so if I designate my wife, she predeceases me, I designate my 4 children, or their testamentary trust shares because they're still young and I'm not ready to give them my retirement account. And then as a backup beneficiary, we might name Christ Church or a charitable organization in case they're all gone. Or I just leave it right to them, or leave a percentage to Christ Church, for example. The part that goes to the charity is not going to affect me income tax-wise, and it's not going to affect me tax-wise. Might give me a benefit against income. And the new concept for IRAs, but not 401ks, by the way. So IRAs is that we can direct that the financial advisor who's the custodian, our stockbroker, who's got our retirement plan, we can direct that the required minimum distribution be directed to a charity up to a limitation, so $105,000. And so if our required minimum distribution, which begins at age 72, is on its way to us, and we say, I'd like to leave that to my church, I'd like to leave that to my charitable organization, we can direct that the stockbroker send that amount of money up to $105,000 directly to the charitable organization. It doesn't pass through me as income, therefore there's no charitable deduction, but it doesn't come to me as income, up to $105,000. That can be part of our charitable pledge, and so if we have an outstanding amount that we need to meet by a certain year, we can direct the stockbroker to send the required minimum distribution amount up to $105,000 to the charitable organization, church or any other.
Can I cut in on that?
Please.
So we're actually seeing a lot more of that here, partly through the capital campaign. People are choosing to give in that way. There are a lot of creative ways that people can do that. Talk to your financial advisor to do that in a way that, I mean, it's always you're giving away money, but it's a way you can do it that helps you in these things, especially with when there's those sort of mandatory requirements. The other thing I want to point out, and I'm saying this, it's going to sound like I'm saying this for my behalf, and I'm not. He mentioned you get to decide the beneficiaries of your will, and he mentioned Christ Church as one of them. It's one of my goals during my time here, before I retire, to create a large endowment that will take care of the physical needs of the church. Because I don't want to leave the church 200 years from now taking care of a very difficult building to take care of. If you don't believe me it's difficult, talk to Dan Rentz, who was the junior warden, or any other junior warden, and they will tell you all about the many leaks we have in the dome. My point, though, is I don't want to burden the future church with those challenges. The main way we can do that is if not just a few people leave a lot of money in their estate, but if a lot of people give a percentage from their estate into our endowment, we could get to that goal where it's able to handle that. I say it doesn't benefit me because it's going to be something that the next rector is so glad that he has. It's something that the future is going to be blessed by more than the present. And so if you would consider, as you're thinking about your estate planning, I'm going to go ahead and be bold. If you're considering your estate planning, I'd ask you to consider Christ Church as part of the designations as you're doing that. And you can either say to the church, and the vestry gets to decide how that money is utilized, and they may put it all in the endowment, or they may do other things, whatever the vestry wants, or you can leave it directly to the endowment. If you need the wording for that, you can talk to Tim or call the church or talk to your attorney to do that, and they can do that as well. All right, we can answer more questions about any of that, but I'll let y'all get back to this now.
I want to touch on something that is, you might think is part of the estate planning process. We typically don't, but it is a very important element that we deal with in all of our cases, and that is funeral and burial. Now, you've heard about it in the last couple of weeks from the funeral director. From our perspective, you might say, well, I need to put my funeral instructions in my will. You'll know what to do. But we often don't get to the will until after the funeral. So if you're supposed to be cryogenically frozen and we instead cremated you and blasted your ashes into the bay, we've kind of missed the point there. And so the funeral instructions can be in the will, but they should be in a separate writing and thought through by you so that our loved ones will know what to do. Michael mentioned the dramatic example of a family fight with two brothers, and one cleared out the house while the other one wasn't looking. That is ordinary and regular inventory for us. We deal with these things on a regular basis. It happens a lot. And so let's think how we're going to deal with funeral and burial. And the who decides? And Florida law is loose and thin and not very substantial, other than y'all work it out and come back inside when you've decided. And so the priority for funeral and burial is, let me come back to number one. Okay, number two person, if we don't have number one, drum roll, is going to be a spouse. Number three is going to be adult children, however they may decide, hopefully agree. Parents, guardians, and then lower down on the list is the executor of your estate. So we have to go through all these people before we even get to the executor of your estate. And so number one, which should be obvious, is you. That you may make a very simple writing instructions. It doesn't have to be notarized or witnessed or sealed. It needs to be your instructions on how to deal with your funeral and burial. And that leads the way. That is what the law would enforce if you got written instructions, even if it contradicts your will and is not witnessed. Your latest lifetime instructions on how to deal with this. Now, Michael and I, in preparation for this, were talking, and Christ Church has burial instructions on the website. They're outstanding. They go through a lot of what Michael and Katie need to know about how to deal with your funeral. I took it and just added a few extra things that I have been through that I thought were very important. We have these, I took the Christ Church form, and I've got 25 or so of them for you to fill out. I think it's very important to do. Where they go would be, you might give it to, share it with Father Michael in an email perhaps. I don't know if he keeps these in files. I think he should and probably does. To share with family members, to put it in your lawyer's file. And Michael has some insight for us.
All of those. Send them to all of those. We have a file in the office where we keep a written copy of every single one of those we get. Also make sure that your children have it, because there's no reason why they shouldn't, or whoever it is that we make in that plan. Also, I've also had contact from people's attorneys. So I'll hear somebody died, and then I'll get a call from an attorney a couple days later saying, just so you know, we have funeral arrangement stuff that we can give you. So it doesn't hurt to if it's part of the will or whatever, but make sure that document is known to the church and also to the family, because again, we keep a file and we pull it out. And then when we meet with the family, we are able to pull it out and say, this is what your loved one wanted, and that starts it off from there.
And so the Christ Church form on the website is excellent. A few things that I have annotated and added to this, and let me just start with the high note, the after party. And so if you have in mind that we're going to have a reception, Dr. Jimmy Jones had Manhattan cocktails in this room served after his. Now, my dad did not leave us his instructions, so the brothers and I had to figure out what he probably would have wanted had we asked. So, of course, we had a band, we made cups. I think someone was selling T-shirts, and it was a real celebration that we think he would have wanted, and we think he was enjoying it with my mother, who also had a wonderful after party. And so, what the funeral customary form for Christ Church Parish provides basics. Who are you? Who is the point of contact to make these decisions where you designate who Michael should speak with, who Katie should confer with, their contact information. Important one that I have added for Michael's consideration: preference for cremation or burial. We should know that. Let it be known. Right one or right two. Who to preach, who to speak. Now, I have added as well consideration for the parishioners, for us to consider honorariums for clergy, music director, anyone else that you would like to say, don't forget to leave an honorarium to the music director who's going to put on such a wonderful production. If it's going to be the Perdido Brass, make sure you write that down. Make sure we know that that's going to be what we have. Preferences for flowers, and so, and then some of the Episcopal parts, the readings, the who will have reflections. I'm struggling for the word on reflections, and who will give the eulogy. Limited to 3 minutes. I don't think most of us know that. Wilmer Mitchell, one time during a funeral for Larry Scott, had to take a halftime. Everybody got up and stretched, went to the bathroom, and came back for the rest of his eulogy. So that exceeded the 3-minute limitation. But so I have these. I want you to consider them. I urge you to fill them out. And it's not necessarily a legal. Let's hope it doesn't become a legal matter. But instead is a housekeeping matter for you to, all of you to consider with Father Michael, Katie, and our wonderful clergy. What questions do you have? Yes, sir.
When one is making out a will, changing a will, what conversations, if any, should be had with the benefactors prior to its execution?
Okay, so the question is, paraphrasing a little bit, what role do the intended beneficiaries have in when we're making our wills? Now, I'm quick to say none, but there could be considerations. Okay, so ordinarily, we don't need their permission. We don't need their permission to name them as the executor or guardian. They may turn it down. They may predecease. They may become convicted felons, so it may not take. But we can list anybody we want to, and we don't have to tell them. You don't have to tell them. It may be courteous to do so. If you want them to do it, you might need to ask them. And I'm talking about the fiduciary role, not to your question, which I'll get to. But we don't need to advise our beneficiaries, which in my thinking creates a little bit of an expectation, a lot of an expectation, that is revocable. We can change that. And so I would say cautiously, if at all, let beneficiaries know anything other than where to find the lawyer, how to get to the priest, what the instructions are, basically the break glass in case of emergency, but we do not necessarily share this with the beneficiaries. Now, sometimes we do and need to. And so hopefully that addressed that question. But let me take you now to a scenario where we might have the will or trust. We might have a revocable trust. And the revocable trust, remember, I described as a truck to haul bricks rather than putting it into your sedan, or a storage unit into which we put things for organizational purposes. So our revocable trust during our lifetime, and I'm saying revocable, and really what we mean by that is subject to amendment. Few people ever revoke their trust. That's rare. What we mean is subject to amendment. Under what terms? When can this revocable trust be amended? At any time during your lifetime, if it's a revocable trust. A little subset of trust is the irrevocable trust, which is a special purpose for when we need to do that. Very special purpose. Now, bear with me for a second. The revocable trust does become irrevocable when the person who has the right to amend it dies, or releases that right, or becomes incapacitated. Then it is, this makes sense, it is no longer subject to amendment. A deceased person cannot amend their trust. That's obvious. That it becomes no longer revocable, no longer subject to amendment. So that is a revocable trust, which is irrevocable. Just believe me. We don't change the name on the trust, by the way. So the revocable trust agreement of Richard Sherrill, dated February 4, 2024. That is the Christian name of this trust, whatever else happens, until it is revoked or terminated. That's the name of it. If it becomes irrevocable, it's still called a revocable trust, and that's kind of a tough concept, but that's the name of it. It gets a taxpayer identification number, and it's a taxpayer. It's, as they say, a baby born in a lawyer's office. And so if we amend it, if I amend it on January 1, 2025, it is still called the Revocable Trust Agreement, Richard Sherrill, dated February 4, 2024. That's the blasphemy here, the Christian name of that trust. And so sometimes an advantage of the revocable trust over the will is if we need someone to administer our assets for us during lifetime. Certainly we need someone to administer our assets when we die. That's the fiduciary, the executor, the personal representative. But during lifetime, we may say, I'm done writing checks for bills, I'm done dealing with real property, I'm done talking to the stockbroker. The person may become incapacitated but not dead. Someone may travel the globe and say, handle it while I'm gone. And that is a scenario, and it's common. And it's very, very useful for assets to be administered under a revocable trust at that point, rather than necessarily through a power of attorney or letter from your mother that says you can go to the bank and get my assets. And so where we have, this is a distinction between what Troop described as the young parent's estate plan essential, and that is true, what he described, the will with trust shares under it. Testamentary trust, meaning shares under a last will and testament. But the revocable trust can be very important if we need it. If we are incapacitated, if we're tired of being our own financial responsible person, we say, I'm turning it over. I have Alzheimer's, I need my daughter to handle my affairs for me, and that's a more official way of dealing with things than the power of attorney. Remember, now, let me reiterate, the power of attorney is essential, but it gets a little bit tiring walking into the bank every time saying, this is a note from my dad that says I can get his money. The bank's like, oh, I hope this is real. I hope this is right. And that is a critical thing to have, but the trust is a more readily available, easier accessible platform, if you will, under that scenario. Troop doesn't need a trust. He's busy working. He doesn't need to worry about where his assets are going, that he's going to stop and retitle his house into his trust or retitle his account into his trust. He just needs to know he's got his will laid out, and it's probably never going to see the light of day. But older clients were going to want to think about the trust that is funded, that has a good lineup of trustees, that is a financially responsible person. It can be a bank. And it's kind of like what the prescription is, what medicine we need. Sometimes we need a bank. Sometimes we need my oldest daughter to be my trustee. Just depends. It can be a combination. And we use those as appropriate. And so, coming back to the question, that person needs to know they're going to be the trustee and are willing to do so. So if my oldest brother names me as his trustee, he says, I'm having Alzheimer's, I'm going to be out of the country for a year, I need you to be my trustee. I need to think, am I going to do that? Do I accept the fiduciary role and the responsibility and the liability and the compensation, the pay, whatever else that is involved? Am I willing to do that? If so, I sign that says I'm the trustee. Then I become the person, it's like the president of a corporation, the manager of an LLC, the person in charge of these assets. So that is one scenario where one would choose the revocable trust rather than a will. And remember, they're both modes of transportation. They both get you down the road. One just has different features than the other. And so that's a real important piece for trust. A trust is easier to disinherit someone. There's less visibility. There's less of a court proceeding. And so if we need to do something that we don't want to be challenged, then sometimes a trust can be a better vehicle for that sometimes. if we have out-of-state real property, that's another indicator where we might say, I know I've got to do work in Florida, but if I have a place in Virginia, I need to get that into my trust so my family doesn't have to hire a Florida lawyer and a Virginia lawyer, for example, to deal with my things. We can put that asset into trust. And now it is dealt with, just like an LLC or a corporation that owns assets, that is dealt with by the person in charge, the fiduciary, the trustee. So, indicator of a trust as compared to the very important for Troop, will.
But you get to decide what's in the trust, correct? So, in other words, you could put some of your assets in, and other assets would be handled by a will if you wanted to have. If you didn't want to have somebody have control over all of it, but they could take care of whatever's needed, you could figure out what's in it, correct?
Correct. And a typical scenario would be where we have, first of all, don't forget, Troop made this point, jointly held assets. If I die, I don't even need a will, by the way, because it all goes to Lisi. She just steps right in. Doesn't matter what my will says. We own our house together. We own our bank account together. My life insurance pays her. All she needs to do is throw a nice party for me and maybe do the cups and the band. And so beneficiary designation is going to sort of be paramount. So if I have designated a beneficiary on my retirement, doesn't matter what's in my trust. But I might take the old back 40 acres that's been in my family forever and say, this goes only to my children. I'm putting this in a trust only to the children. That's where a trust might be the single specific purpose. And meanwhile, my retirement can pass to my wife by beneficiary designation, which it should. We call that a spousal rollover, by the way. And so the assets can pass in ways other than the trust. The most common that all of us have are beneficiary designations. And we handle that not through our lawyer or judge, but through our financial advisor typically. And they have an entire regime of size 6 font that we need to know what it says in the beneficiary contract to know what happens if the owner or participant dies. But we all deal with that, and that's exactly on point for Michael's question, that it might be through beneficiary designation, joint titling, and we might have a specific asset we want to pass under a trust. Yes, sir.
A bit of a sticky wicket. Apparently the way a state law changes over time, the year you die in has significance.
Correct. It's the applicable law at the time when you pass, and the laws change. We work on them.
Without regard to the means of that.
Okay, all right, I can agree with that. And then, by the way, when should we update our documents? When circumstances change. Certainly, death, birth, divorce, remarriage, all of those features were the sort of life-changing moments. And we don't keep up with you. We don't write, say, oh, I know you had a grandchild, come see me. You know, we might say that in the parish hall, but we don't pursue you necessarily when you need to know that the law changed. We're expecting that you're reading the Wall Street Journal and you'll call us when you need us. Right here, then Don.
If I wanted to pay off a child's mortgage, which would exceed the $18,000 that I'm allowed,
Yes.
what's the document that you file against your $13 million?
Yes, sir.
Reduce.
A 709, that is the gift tax return. So 1040 is our individual income tax return. The 709 is the gift tax
Is that
return.
just a one-sheet thing?
Sort of. It's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward.
File it every time you give more than $18,000 a year?
Yes.
And
Yes.
they keep track of what's what.
Yes, sir. That's right.
And what about the use of PODs and TODs? I mean, if you had all of your accounts, you had a POD, do you need a will and an estate for that? I mean, it automatically goes to.
Yes, you still should. And I go back to Father Michael's admonition. You must have a will, even though, like me, I have the estate plan you described. Everything's pay on death. Everything's joint. You heard me say I don't need a will, but I still have one, okay? Because we never know. We sometimes say, just don't die at the same time. And so sometimes that happens. So you need a will. And because the power of the POD, the pay on death, TOD, transfer on death, may not work. So what do we do if it doesn't work? Your beneficiary may predecease you, and by 1 minute, then we need to know what to do with it. So yes, you should have a will as well. Donald Russell.
At what age should young adults start with a living will or a will or?
Okay, all right. So when to begin? And My children are so happy to turn 18, they get an appointment with me at my office so they can give me power of attorney. And so they can also do a designation of healthcare. So a critical moment, making the will is, I wouldn't urge that at 18 necessarily. That's not necessarily what we do. That's not a primary consideration. But the power of attorney to a parent can be a very important thing. And the designation of healthcare, the medical power of attorney, can be very, 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 very important when they go to college. And if anyone has ever tried to call the bursar or call the nurse or speak, certainly they'll talk to you about your bill. And they forget everything they're about to say. Oh, you certainly didn't pay us. Well, we can't tell you what his or her grades are, what their health condition is, if they're going to class. They, and this is kind of writ large, will not give you any of that information. They will give you the billing information. But so at age 18, please consider a power of attorney discussion. And they're adults and you can't make them do it, but we can certainly strong arm them real hard. But a designation, the medical power of attorney is critical. And so I would say then, when a young adult starts to think about getting married, that's when we need to deal with it. That's when we typically would deal with it. Hope that answers. Yes, sir.
One of the unique things about being a young military recruit, especially for the Marines, you are almost required to have a will. And I think that's a pivotal, almost watershed point for a lot of young folks when they're 18 and having to fill out a document to handle their death.
Very good.
So I've known people who give estate planning as a gift to their children. Every 5 years, it's like what they do. They say it's part of their Christmas because they always wanted to make sure their kids did that kind of work, and they knew they wouldn't if they didn't do that. But he also makes a good point. I've seen it in the hospitals a bunch. Doctors will tend to do the right thing regardless, but HIPAA laws change the way that information is shared. So if they can't prove that this person is your medical power attorney or somebody who can actually get that information, they may choose not to tell you anything, right? So like it's important to have that stuff to make sure that that the person making the decisions for you would have as much information as you would have in that moment, which is again kind of the same thing of who, like you said about the college student, they don't have to tell you anything. The same thing I've found is true in medical care as well if you don't have the medical power attorney.
I have, as I said, I've taken Michael's excellent funeral customary questionnaire, added a few things that Michael and I can talk about. I think they're all approved by him. And I want to hand these out if anybody wants one, because you should fill it out. And you should let Michael know, you should let your loved ones know what we should serve at your after party. Chris Hart.
Richard, could you give the basics of that intestate in Florida?
Okay, without a will, the intestate laws of Florida provide that everything passes, it depends with a blended family with stepchildren. So non-blended family, all to surviving spouse, 100%. If no surviving spouse, all to children, and then their children, and if none, so we stop when we get to one of these. So if you have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, parents, but you have a spouse, it stops with spouse. Okay, so first the spouse, if any. If none, then the children, grandchildren, parents, brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, all the way down to the Orphans Fund, which ultimately it's going to go to the state of Florida. And that's called escheat, E-S-C-H-E-A-T. And that rarely ever happens. But where they put that is on the website. It's the Florida Treasure Hunt. If you type in your name or an ancestor's name, you'll see if you've got an old account out there. But that is the ultimate intestate repository. But it is going to say, first to Chris's question, spouse, children, grandchildren, parents, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, out. Intestate is. But if you have a will, then we don't need to know about that. So the will avoids that. And your will, like mine, precisely mirrors the intestacy. But if there's something I need to get done, we should not rely on that. And having a will is inefficient legal fees wise, for example. I mean, just by the way. So much more efficient, cost effective to have a will than to rely on intestacy, which can change from time to time. Any other questions? Well, it's been a real pleasure. Yes, Donald.
A lot of changes happened in my family, deaths and so forth. And on my living will, I've had to scratch the name out of the main person and sign it myself. Do I need to have that redone with trust and have them pay you to make it right, or can I just scratch it out and sign it there?
That probably works. You're probably okay. I mean, remember the commercial. That's probably good enough. Now, so there's levels of what we need to do. If you wanted to scratch out on a deed and say, oh, that's good enough, not good enough. If you want to just annotate something in your will, not good enough. So there's hierarchy of these documents and what's required. Funeral instructions can be the most important. You barely have to sign it, but you should sign it. And you want to scratch something off, you would initial and re-sign it, which is what Donald said. If we want to make a little annotation of don't have that caterer, have David Penniman instead, you could just annotate that and sign it. That's easy. As we work our way up, the living will, it's probably going to work at the nurse's station. I can say, get in here quick, whoever the person is, come on. If you do that on a power of attorney, the bank is going to send it to the lawyers. It's going to take you quite a while. If it is on a will, don't do it. You have to do an amendment to your will. It's called a codicil. We generally just do a new will because we kept it on our word processor, just update it. And so some of these things require written action. Some of them require signature. Some of them require witnesses. Some of them require witnesses and a notary. Some require just a notary. Some require witnesses and a notary. And so, we jokingly say you can pull your own teeth, but a dentist does it a little bit better. And so, it's free to pull your own teeth. On that cheery note, do we have any further questions? Well, yes.
Hi, this is a career in healthcare. The staff is saying we can't talk to you because you don't have a power of attorney thing.
Right.
We could be terminated by disclosing information. So it depends on sort of the relationships. Doctors are not going to be terminating doctors, but the rest of the clerks and the nurses and stuff, they can be terminated. So you need to know where that is so that if one of your loved ones goes in the hospital, that you could, even though you think you have it on file, if Baptist or wherever, have it ready so that they can talk to you.
That is an excellent point. So what we're talking about is Health Information Privacy Act, HIPAA. And we shouldn't, it's so easy to just type in designation of healthcare surrogate, it's statutory form. You just grab it from the statute, put it on paper, fill it in by hand. Don't need a lawyer or notary. Let's not rely on favors from the nurse's station. Let's save those. When we're going to need for someone to get authorization to medical care and medical information, just fill out the form. It's very easy. And we won't be leaning on staff to say, oh, just cut me a break and let me know what's wrong. Or, we need HIPAA waivers. That is a federal law, and they intended it the way it is. So it's very easy to comply. We should.
I found, even in 17 years as a priest, radically different. When I started as a priest, they would call the church and let them know that so-and-so is in the church. They put on a form. They will not do that anymore. Also, oftentimes you can call and say, is so-and-so at this hospital? And they'll say yes or no, but they're really not supposed to. Instead, you say, what room are they in? As if you have knowledge they're there. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have that person. I'm like, oh, thanks. And then I'll call Baptist and ask the same question. I say all that because, again, you can probably find a way around it. You can probably find a way to make it happen. But it's so much easier if that clarity is there. All right, other questions for our attorneys? All right, your takeaway, have a will. Or in whatever other needs you have will be dependent upon your particular situation. Amy and I even did a new one before we went to France for 3 months for our sabbatical, just as we were kind of making sure we have everything sorted out. And then a while later, we decided to change the order of people that would be guardians of our children if something happened to the two of us, and so we have those changes. It's not meant to be a static document. It's meant to be something as your life changes, it changes with you. And so I also will say, well, I'm sure you can pull a form off online and do it. And if you need to, do that. If you're able to find somebody to help you that knows that field, especially if you have you go to them and say, here's what I want. And they say, here's how we can do that, or how we can't do that would be helpful. So an attorney helping you finish this out would be beneficial. All right, so next week we have one last class. We're going to do two things. One, we're going to have a presentation on aging care, retirement communities, nursing homes, that sort of thing, and things you should consider as you're facing that. Also, we're going to talk, Katie and I are going to talk about, well, if we believe all this about death, and if we've done this work to die well, then what does that mean about how we live? We're going to have a little bit of discussion, and maybe also I'm interested to hear y'all's reflections on what else needs to be covered in this class. This is our second time. We did the first one like 6 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. We'll do it again in 5 more years. So what do we need to add? And also I'm interested to hear your stories through this process as you've faced loved ones dying and realities of that. All right, so that's the last class. It is next week. Thank you all for being here.